So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session of the Straight Path with Belinda Fultz and Brian Shields. So today we are going over the Motivational Strategies Path, and our speaker has completed other paths as well, such as the Presentation Mastery and Dynamic Leadership paths. But tonight we're going through the Motivational Strategies Path. So this presentation will consist of going through the path as well as allowing some time for questions and answers at the end. So I hope everyone enjoys that you learn something and that we have some good discussion over the path and ask some good questions. So I would like to turn it over to Nandini Kurup, who will be giving our presentation for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to share my screen. I'm hoping you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So to start out, let me start out with a quote. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. This is a quote by Neil Donald Walsh. And why this is so important is because we get so caught up in the now and we get so comfortable with the things that we are used to doing. We get complacent and we cease to live, because unless and until we step out of that comfort zone, we are not going to learn, we are not going to evolve. And this quote is so powerful. There was a story that I heard at one of the conferences a few years ago. This was by an international director, Dilip Abhisekara. And the story goes like this. There was a man and he goes to a museum. He sees there's a 3 feet long vase, which is at the corner of one of the exhibits. He watches it and there's this little Mexican flea, this little bug that jumps right up to the top of the vase, but never over it. It jumps right below that 3 feet mark, but never beyond it. He watches that bug for a while, and then he's curious. How come the bug or the Mexican flea does not jump beyond the 3 feet mark? Because that would set it free. That would explore an ocean of possibilities. So he goes and asks the curator, how is it that this Mexican flea does not jump beyond that 3 feet mark? The curator tells him, you ask a very interesting question. The Mexican jumping flea can typically jump up to 6 feet. So 3 feet wouldn't be a stretch for it. But when the Mexican jumping flea is put in this vase, there's a lid that is put at the top of the vase. So the Mexican jumping flea jumps, and it jumps. It tries to jump beyond that 3 feet mark because it knows it can, but each time it does, it bumps its head. And it's not comfortable at that point. And eventually, it gets to a point wherein it jumps right below that 3 feet mark because that's its comfort zone. We are a lot like that Mexican flea because we can jump, we can do a lot more than we think we can do because we tend to stay in that comfort zone. And that's why this quote is so impactful. This applies to our Toastmasters journey as well, because unless you step out of that comfort zone, unless you put a stake in the ground and say, I'm going to complete a pathway, say in the next year and a half, or the next year, or the next 2 years, you're not going to step out of that comfort zone. You're not going to challenge yourself, and you're not going to do it. With that, let's dive into the presentation. A little about me. I have been with Toastmasters since May of 2018. It's been a little over 2 years. The paths that I've completed are Presentation Mastery, Dynamic Leadership, and Motivational Strategies. I have 3 paths that are underway. And I'm probably in level 2, level 3 on each of these paths. The 3 paths that I have going are strategic relationships, visionary communicator, and engaging humor. Engaging humor because humor does not come naturally to me. So that is me challenging myself and challenging myself to step out of my comfort zone. I got my DTM in June of this year. I've served as a club coach, president, and VP of membership. I placed 3rd at the district level D30 international speech contest last year, and I placed 1st at the district level 103 international speech contest this year and went on to the regionals. So today, let's first start out with why I selected this path. As the name says, motivational strategies, it's all about motivating people. And I love to tell stories. I love to inspire people, motivate people, and make a difference in the lives of people. And that's what Toastmasters is all about. And that's why I love it. The reason why I selected this path was because I wanted to be a powerful and effective communicator. I wanted to build connections because motivation is all about building connections. It's all about understanding people, building relationships, and understanding what motivates them. And the whole path, it culminates in a team building project, which is when, again, you work with people, and also along this path, you learn and develop your public speaking skills. So there are 11 paths that you could choose from. The one that we're going to focus on today is motivational strategies. And the stake on the ground that I'm going to put out there is probably in the next 3 years, I want to complete all these 11 paths. And hopefully at that point, we'll have a lot more paths available. Core competencies. The motivational strategies is highlighted here. You'll see with motivational strategies, you get to work on public speaking, you get to work on interpersonal communication, you get to work on strategic leadership and confidence, which comes with any path that you might select. A glance at the motivational strategies path. Regardless of the path you select within pathways, there are 5 different levels that you get to complete. Levels 1 and 2 are very similar, as in level 1 is very much similar. Level 2 is slightly modified depending on your path. Levels 3, 4, and 5 are when you begin to focus and hone in on the path that you've selected, building skills towards path completion. You also get to select from a whole slew of electives in levels 3, 4, and 5. We will dive into each level and we'll go through the journey. You'll see the speeches that I gave at each of the levels. I'll talk a little about it. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you would want to put a stake on the ground and say, I'm going to complete this particular pathway by probably end of next year or end of the year and a half. This is a view of all the 5 levels and the electives under levels 3, 4, and 5. Level 1, motivational strategies. So as you can see on the left, level 1, there are 3 projects that you work on, but 4 speeches. Project 1 is an icebreaker. Regardless of the pathway that you select, the icebreaker is a speech or a project where you get to talk about yourself, an aspect of yourself, or some element of yourself. My icebreaker for motivational strategies was titled, My Lighthouse as I Sail Through Life. This was a speech about my mom because she was a constant figure throughout my life growing up and continues to be a constant figure, and how I looked up to her and how she guided me through the way through life, and she continues to do so. Project 2, there are 2 speeches that you give. Speech 1 is a speech that you give to get evaluation and feedback. Speech 2 is a speech that you give after applying that evaluation and feedback. So speech 2 could have been the same speech or a different speech. I chose to do a different speech. So speech 2 was about the big picture. So this is where I spoke about focusing on not just the now or the immediate, but the beyond. It's about looking at that big picture. I have the story of the 3 bricklayers, where the first bricklayer focuses on one brick, the second sees the wall, and the third sees the cathedral. The second part of this project was the second speech, which was about leadership. I spoke about Steve Jobs' journey and how he evolved through the years to become a great leader. Speech 4 is about researching and presenting. So this is a topic that you might not be familiar with. It might be new to you. It might be something that might interest you. Eat the Frog was all about procrastination. There's a book by Brian Tracy which talks about procrastination, and it says, if you need to eat a frog anyway, eat the ugliest frog. Which means if there are 2 tasks that are daunting, work on the one that is most daunting. With that, let's dive into level 2. Level 2 has 3 projects. Project number 1 is focused on communication style. This was very interesting for me because I didn't know if I had a dominant communication style. And it turns out that when you take the assessment, it will tell you if you have a dominant style, and it will tell you how you fared across. And for me, this was eye-opening because I learned that I did not really have a dominant style. So a lot of my communication might be situational, it might depend on the audience, and so on. So a lot of these projects have a pre-assessment, they have a post-assessment, because it tells you, you get to see how you fared before the project and then how you fared after it. Project 2 was on active listening. So this is when you get to be a table topics master and you're constantly listening. I love to be a table topics master because you listen just like being an evaluator. You're constantly listening. You're focusing on those active listening skills so that as an evaluator, you might be providing feedback. As a table topics master, you're able to weave or summarize what the previous speaker has spoken and before you introduce the next. The last project in level 2, and on the 6 paths that I've done, the third project in level 2 stays the same. Active listening was different, communication style was different. So the third project is all about mentorship. And mentorship is so important because that is when both the mentor and the mentee get to grow. My speech was titled, Because You Believed in Me. And this is because the mentor believes in the mentee. And that's why the mentee can go on to accomplish great things, but the mentor is also learning along the way. Toastmasters has an excellent mentorship program. So if you have not made use of it, make sure you do it. You could be a member of 2 clubs. You could be a member of 1 club. Make sure you reach out. You could have multiple mentors because each one might focus on a different aspect of you, and you will grow along the way. Level 3. Level 3 had 3 projects. So the mandatory project that you do is about EQ, because in order to motivate people, you need to feel for people. You need to have that empathy. You need to have that emotional quotient. So I started out with the story of Phineas Gage, how he lost a part of his brain, and he was not the same again, because the part of the brain that processed his emotions was missing. And we often focus so much on the IQ that we forget about the EQ, but EQ is equally or more important because that is what connects us to different people. My project number 2 was about storytelling. It was one of the electives that I selected. This is where I spoke about how your stories can induce certain neurotransmitters within the minds of the audience. Spoke about oxytocin, endorphins, and it's having that magical cocktail which you can induce just through your stories and through your talk. The last project here was to inspire my audience. It was titled In His Moccasins. There's an old Indian quote which says, to understand a person truly, you need to walk a mile in his moccasins. And this was a talk on racial divide. It was a talk on an experiment that featured on PBS, which was conducted several years ago in Indiana. It was an elementary teacher who wanted to teach her class what racial divide meant, and this was because they did not understand what losing Martin Luther meant at that point. So she did an experiment on the blue-eyed kids and the brown-eyed kids. Basically what it means is to feel how the other feels. You need to step into his shoes or his or her moccasins. Level 4. Level 4 is when you have one mandatory project and you get to select 2 electives from a whole slew of electives. My mandatory project was Motivate Others. This is where I spoke about the different public speaking levers just to motivate people to compete. The timing was such that this was right before the international contest, and this was to get others within my clubs to compete at the international contest. So spoke about different levers, spoke about the length of your speech. Example, if you're doing a 5 to 7 minute speech, make sure that it's not more than 900 words, because if not, you're not going to be able to complete it within the 5 to 7 minute window. I also had to manage a project as a part of this, which I also managed as a part of my DTM journey, which was my Speechcraft project. So I spoke about my project, which was related to the elective project, Manage Projects Successfully. So spoke about the Speechcraft program, how it wasn't one person. It takes an army to deliver something magnificent. The Speechcraft program was extremely successful, and we got all the Speechcrafters to sign in to be our club members. And today, Saturday Morning Workout has close to 50 club members, just because of these programs, because of what we do and what we do to promote membership. The last project here was about talking to the different types of difficult audience and different levers on how you could counter it. The reason why this is important is because you might be giving a speech, you might be doing a presentation, and there might be somebody at the corner of a room talking away. And how do you deal with that situation? Because you need to address it, because that cannot go on. Or there might be somebody else who just wants to argue. So you have the talker, you have the arguer. How do you diffuse the situation? What do you do in that situation? How do you take control? And that's why, as you see, each project along the journey focuses on a different muscle. So it helps you build up to be an efficient, effective speaker, one muscle at a time. Level 5. Level 5 is where you talk about team building, and then you reflect on that path. So team building was, again, the project that we did, which was a 6-session Speechcraft program, and how we had to plan for it, how we had to get a team of advisors, a team of coordinators together, and how we recruited the Speechcrafters. So it was about building that team, keeping that team going, and working through the program. Lessons learned was what we learned from that Speechcraft program, because there were lots of lessons that we learned. Like, for instance, class size. We never thought that that would be an issue. Through the program, we figured out that if you have 6 sessions, each being 2 hours long, the class size should be 6 to 7, not more than that, because only then each of the Speechcrafters gets to talk, deliver a speech, and do a table topics, and do an evaluation. Reflecting on my path was reflecting on my pathway journey. As a part of this, one of the electives that I selected was also Prepare to Speak Professionally. It so happened that I did get a professional paid speaking opportunity towards the end of this path, and the speech that I delivered was the Trailblazer. I was invited to US Cellular to do a talk for their diversity event. The speech that I gave was talking about your goal, your vision, and how you start working towards that bigger picture. We did a mural at the end of it. So it's all about learning different skills and then applying it. So the project culminates with that, with the public speaking opportunity in this case. How did this pathway help me? It helped me in several ways. First of all, it helped me build connections. It helped me understand people and what motivated them. It helped me become an effective communicator. It helped me connect and motivate my audience. It helped me realize and be aware of the paybacks that I might receive. It's very different and might be difficult in Zoom, but when you have an audience, a payback could be a sigh, it could be a clap, it could be a laugh, it could be a frown, and it could be a question which gets them thinking. So just being aware of it is what helps you develop as a speaker, because you get to build on it. And finally, team building and project execution, because this pathway culminates in a project. So to leave you with a quote before we take questions, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. So like that Mexican flea, as a Toastmaster, you're capable of achieving a lot more. You're capable of jumping twice of what you jump now. So put that stake on the ground and say you're going to complete a pathway. It could be in the next year, it could be the next year and a half, or it could be the next 2 years. Start putting a plan, work towards it, and you will start developing your public speaking skills one muscle at a time. With that, I'll open up for questions, and let me stop sharing so that I can see your faces. Any questions?
So I have one actually. So I know when you were going through the more so the level 3, 4, and 5s, you were mentioning how there were so many different electives to choose from. Which elective would you say is your favorite that you did? And I guess the second part to the question would be, is there an elective that was in the path that you had wished you had done, but that you chose another one over?
Sure, thank you. So my favorite elective is connecting through storytelling, because I love to tell stories. It's also inspiring the audience. And I've seen that show up in probably 2 or 3 of the paths that I've taken so far, and I love it. To challenge myself, the next time I need to select one of the selectives, I might probably do a podcast, because again, to challenge yourself to do something different, because there's so much more that you can learn. So rather than selecting the same elective, do something different so that you can learn and step out of that comfort zone and learn something different.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you feel like you did well the first time you did each of your speeches, or did you wish like you had the opportunity to redo it? And if so, did you redo it?
Yes, I have redone a few, because when I did the speeches, based on the feedback that I received, one of the speeches that I can recollect is in his moccasins, because it was so powerful. But the way my focus was very different the first time I gave it, because the focus was all about biases, unconscious biases and things like that. But I think that story was more powerful. So when I redid it the second time, I built on that story. So it was a very different speech, but it was the same one which developed based on the feedback. So yes, so once you do it, you'll definitely have an opportunity to build on it and represent it either with a different path or with the same path at a different elective. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to ask, since you've completed so many different levels, or different paths, which is your favorite path out of all of them?
My favorite path out of all of them has been motivational strategies, just because I like that motivational, inspirational piece. But I'm also currently doing visionary communicator. And that is also a path that I like, because it culminates in building that vision and working towards it. Again, it's about having that bigger picture and things like that. I have not done it with any other path, so that has been my favorite. The challenging path, I would say so far, has been engaging humor, just because it does not come naturally to me. So I have to work extra hard for it. But I'm pretty confident that at the end of the path, I will be able to weave in a lot of those elements. Right now, I've completed level 1, so I still have a long way to go on engaging humor. But that's the reason why I'm dragging my feet, just because I have to be funny with it.
You know, just so you know, there is different types of humor. So you just have to find a humor that works for you.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree completely. And it's me finding that which comes naturally to me and that I can apply and I can build on and I can grow with.
Well, I wish you the best of luck in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Bonnie.
Anyone else have any questions?
Hi, Nandini. I have a question. This is Fanlan.
Sure.
Just wondering, how are you able to have 3 passes going on at the same time?
Yes,
I'm just
for sure.
curious. Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So when I started out, I was a member of one club. I did not know what to expect with Toastmasters, but then I figured that I loved, and I discovered that I have a passion for speaking and a passion for Toastmasters. So today I'm a member of 3 clubs. So that's why I have 3 paths going. I have 1 path going with each club. So that way I get to focus on speeches on a particular pathway with a particular club.
Thank you for that question.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that is pretty awesome. That's what I did when I joined my second club, is I decided to choose a path for that club.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I just love it because I started coaching a club, and then when my coaching engagement ended, I joined the club as a member, which made complete sense. And then I had a club in the same building, which met at lunch. So I figured instead of eating lunch, I could go there and get most out of Toastmasters.
So I know this is about your path and stuff, but now that I think about it, have you gone to other clubs outside of district, or because some things are still virtual, have you got to go to other places and see things differently?
The only time I went outside the district was during the contest, and that was just to see how different districts were doing their contests. Also because I wanted to see what else was out there with respect to how people were presenting and things like that. So that was the only time I did, but I definitely want to use this time to go visit other districts, visit other clubs, just because given the fact that we are home, it makes sense to make the most out of it while we can. Have you done it?
Of course. I'm actually a
have?
member in Poland.
Oh, nice.
And I go visit Georgia all the time. And when I get a chance, which I haven't because of contest season, but I do like a club in UK.
Oh, wow. That's great. That's awesome. The only thing that I've been thinking about doing outside of here is my mom. She is also into public speaking. So when I first joined Toastmasters, she came with me to the first meeting, and she wants to start a club in the college where she teaches. So I might help sponsor that club and grow and probably help coach that club. So that might be something that I might do outside. But yes, I should definitely make the most out of this time and visiting other clubs and joining other clubs as members.
That's amazing. Woo!
Wow. So you're in every other day, you'll be in Toastmasters meeting.
Yes.
I have two clubs. Each of them, the club meets weekly. So I attend 2 meetings weekly.
That is still good.
They work different. One's a corporate club. It's more like if people on the similar background. The other one is a community club. Yeah, works different.
Yeah. Even I've realized that the feedback is very different when you work with the people that come to the Toastmasters Club and when you're with somebody who is different from the community. Just the kind of feedback might be different because I feel the feedback is more open at Saturday morning workout just because it's a community club. We meet at Yellow Box. So it's a great club and I've grown so much just because people give you unrestricted feedback.
Does anyone else have any last thoughts or anything for tonight? All right, well, seeing none, Nandini, I want to thank you for giving this presentation tonight. I liked the PowerPoint, and I hope that everyone here got as much out of it as I did. I'm thinking that this might be a path that I will think about signing up in the future after I get further along on the ones that I do.
Awesome.